Thank you, Planning Committee, for putting me after that talk, because it's actually a really good connection. I think Chris said the word communication more than he said data or research. And that's what this talk is all about. Because if we're moving into a world where there's going to be more fire and that we can't work around that, we need to work through it, then there's a lot that can be good about fire for all the destruction that it does. There are good things that people can see from it. And how can we make people see that? How can we make people accept that they're going to live in a world with fire and not just tolerate it, but maybe even appreciate it? Because I think that no matter how hard we work on mitigation or research or suppression, it's not going to be enough if people don't understand why we're doing that, why it's beneficial. And so during the Cameron Peak fire, when I was living here, I didn't feel that the fire situation was being told properly or fully. And this concerned me as much as the fire itself, because while fire is the problem, it's also the solution. During those days of orange skies and endless smoke, I felt that coverage and discussion were oversimplified. Over and over, news cameras zoomed in on the biggest flames and the blackest aftermath, and then left and moved on to the next fire in the West. And I realized that's how this story is always told, but it's not the whole story. To accelerate adaptation and shift expectations around fire, we need to better explain it and show it. We invest a lot in research and more so in implementation, and of course, a lot into suppression. But I think we can do more around communicating and showing this, because this topic is hard for people to access. It's hard for people to see fire or even to see the effects of fire. All they see is a burnt house, the news coverage, or what's on Instagram. But visuals, multimedia can help with that. And I'm a photographer and a filmmaker and a conservationist with some background in forest restoration. And I wanted to use those tools to paint a more complete picture of the Cameron Peak fire and of fire more generally. I wanted to show people that fire's effects are diverse, they are complicated, and that they can be beneficial even. That fire is a natural part of the forest and will continue to be a part of the forest. At the same time, increasingly large and severe fires are a problem, like here above our drinking water supply here in Fort Collins. So I wanted to do something that would increase support for action, for restoration, specifically forest thinning and prescribed burning. And so in those lockdown days of the end of 2020, when I had a lot of free time and a limited social life, I planned a 5-year multimedia project to help do that. And because apparently I thought my social life would always be like that, I took on 4 significant final products that I'm now working on. I pitched the idea to some local groups here and was honored when these groups agreed to fund it and or guide it. And with their support, I set out to create something that would show fire's role in a new way. I wanted to show people this issue that we hear so much about on the news in a way that they hadn't seen before. I wanted to show it in a way that would make people stop and reconsider their ideas and expectations around fire in forests. I knew that one thing that I needed to do was show the connection between water and fire in forests, because through water and fire's impacts on it, pretty much everyone's connected to it. And if I could do that, I thought that I could bring a lot of people into this story. So one of the first things that I did was set up a long-term time-lapse camera on the bank of the Poudre River as it runs through the burn area. And with those images, the camera's been taking one image, at least an image every daylight hour since May of 2021. And with those images, I've been able to create long-term time lapses of fire's impacts on water like we've never seen before. In 2021, there were several high turbidity events after the high rainfalls that flushed a tremendous amount of ash, debris, and sediment into the river. Like here, the day of the Black Hollow flood, which killed 6 people and who knows how many fish, and filled the river with sediment. We can now show this to people in a way that, as far as I know, has never been done before. It also documented more long-term things. If you watch the center bottom of the screen here, you'll see the gradual sediment accumulation as it builds up in the river over the summer of 2021. So we can explain to people how this isn't a one-off, this is a long-term issue, and explain why the river still runs black today when we have high flows that disturb the riverbed. I also, as Chris was talking about the transition from forests, as a photographer, was really curious to photograph the forest's transformation because a lot of different forest types here burned at different levels. And as we know, with climate change, with a hotter, drier climate, it's getting harder for trees to regenerate. We don't know what the forest will look like in 10 years, or even if there will be a forest, which may be morbid, but as a photographer, that's something I at least want to document so that we can show people this. So I wanted to set up long-term photo monitoring points in different forest types to document the forest's transformation in a changing environment. And so as soon as I could after the fire, I set up about a dozen photo points in different forest types and photographed them in May of 2021, then at the end of the first growing season, and then last August at the end of the second growing season. And here are some of the results. And I plan to continue doing these photos as long as I'm here. But so far, the lodgepole photos at high elevation, high severity show a mixed response. In some areas, we see almost no plant regrowth after 2 growing seasons, but we do see the erosion of soil and the absence of that vegetation. However, in some areas, there's amazing natural regrowth. If you watch the bottom left corner of the screen, you'll see 3 lodgepole seedlings sprout out of the ashes. And that growth continued from what I call babies into the second to teenagers into the second growing season, scraggly and awkward, but healthy and growing. And this lets us show people that even a burnt and black forest isn't destroyed, a word that I hear used so much about fire, and especially during and after the Cameron Peak fire. And if we're going to live in a world with more fire, and we're going to be sad and depressed about it, we can at least show people that there's hope, there's resilience, there's natural adaptations. This isn't an entirely man-made catastrophe. There's a natural ability for forests to come back from fire. And if we prepare them to receive fire, they can best express their natural resilience to it, which some other photo points show in a really exciting way. Lower elevation ponderosa forest that was thinned before the Cameron Peak fire burned it. When I got there, I was really excited to see how low severity this burn was, and wanted to see if the forest would continue to look good. It did. In the first growing season, there was an amazing flush of flowers and grasses. The place looked beautiful and probably had more biodiversity than it did before the fire. And that continued into the second growing season, although under a bit drier conditions that year. Here's a comparison of the outside and the inside of that treatment unit on the left. Notice how burnt and black those lodgepoles are and how dense they were, and how much within the perimeter on the right regrew after the fire. To me, what's most exciting is the individual trees' response here. It's known that ponderosas will die if too much of their canopy is scorched. And in some of these trees here, 100% of the canopy was scorched. But in the first growing season, some of those trees regrew their needles. Now, sometimes it takes a couple of years for a scorched tree to die, which is why the longevity of these points are important. But that regrowth only continued in the second year, with the canopy being mostly recovered. And we'll see what it does this year. This isn't a scientific study, but it does show what we know about forest resilience in a way that pretty much everyone can understand. It lets us demonstrate the value, the return on investment of proactive treatments before the fire, and why there's reason for hope going forward. Third was a photo essay that I'm currently working on, because I want to show people the diversity of fire's effects. I want them to see that fire is more than a giant wall of flames that leaves everything black and dead and destroyed. There's a spectrum of fire from low severity to high. And although we've seen a concerning growth of high severity fire, all fire has its place on the landscape, and low intensity fire is so beneficial for restoring forest resilience to future megafires. So as soon as I could, after the Cameron Peak fire, I went out into the burn perimeter to look for different fire effects. I was concerned by a lot of the amount of high severity fire that I saw. A lot of this watershed did burn really hot and uniformly, but I kept looking. And everywhere I went, almost, I could still find signs of good fire, effects that weren't being shown on the news or on Instagram. I found beautiful burn mosaics like this, which I consider beautiful because they're so important for preventing future megafires. They're probably what the landscape looked like more so before Europeans came. And when you have a watershed that looks like this, it's a lot harder to have a 200,000 acre fire. Also, just for the note of hope, when we talk about a 200,000 acre fire, unprecedented, record breaking, people usually aren't including this. This is included in the 200,000 acres, along with a lot of acres that you can't even tell were burned. So I also want people to see that when we have these large fires, not all of it is inherently bad and destructive. Some of it's doing good work too. And I found beauty. I found beauty in the growth and the resilience. In many areas, the burn released a flush of nitrogen, and the open canopy released a super bloom of wildflowers. And I found hope in sites like lodgepole seedlings sprouting out of the ashes. The photo essay is still a work in progress, but I'm hoping to begin publishing it, displaying it, and working with partners to maybe send it around the state to show people this side of fire next year. Finally, my current focus is working on a short film about how forest thinning done by the Larimer County Conservation District at the Drala Mountain Center, combined with U.S. Forest Service prescribed burning, helped stop a portion of the Cameron Peak fire at Drala Mountain Center, and essentially save the center from total destruction and probably stop the fire from moving into some significant communities downhill. It's an amazing story, and we need to be telling this kind of story as loudly and widely as we can. The intent is to show other landowners the tremendous return on investment that this kind of proactive work can have, get them excited and motivated to cut more trees or allow burning on their land, and to work across boundaries, across jurisdictions and agencies to repeat this kind of success that was had here. So I'm editing it currently, working very hard on that, and hope to have that ready to start working with partners here, set up screenings and events locally. So I started this project on Christmas of 2020, and since then I've put in 400 hours on this. This is not my full-time job. This is all what I do in my free time. The reason I'm doing it is because I want to help the people in this room get more forest restoration done. To accelerate adaptation and shift expectations, we need to show fire and restoration better. We need to show what restoration work can do and what fire really is, or the full breadth of what it is. And these visual products can help us do that. They're showing the issue here locally in Colorado Forest in a way that hasn't been done before and in a format that people can easily understand. But these images and videos are only useful if people see them. And Fireforest doesn't have a big audience. It's a new thing. I don't get a lot of leftover time to work on advertising and promoting it. So my key strategy is to partner with organizations like all of yours to get these images and videos in front of the landowners, the lawmakers, the recreationists who need to see it and help sway or rethink perspectives and expectations about where we're going. So if your organization can benefit from this work, from these images, if you are trying to convey these messages, or if you have ideas for collaborating and working together and putting these images in front of people, please reach out to me. There's social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. There's a shiny new website. And I'm really, as I move out of the pre-production phase and into the promotion phase this year and next, I'm really excited to work with everyone here, the umbrella groups like the Forest Collaboratives, the Fireshed, to coordinate a way to supplement all the work that all of you all are doing with some of the visuals and the storytelling and the communication. Thank you.